I always knew that my family's lands were special. These same 1,000 acres of land have been passed down from one generation to another for more than 200 years. My earliest memories as a child involved helping my brothers and father deliver food to handmade wood boxes to help feed the animals that roamed our lands during the harshest of winters, when food was scarce and it was difficult for anything to survive. I never would have imagined these gestures to help feed the animals would one day lead to an event that would change my life forever. Looking back, I had so many signs of their existence, but I thought they were like other animals, just trying to survive the harsh winters. This would all change when I returned for my first summer break since starting college. While enjoying my time back at home, I did my best to help around the farm. My father was still very active, and we would ride out on four-wheelers to repair fencing, refill water tanks, and check on the animals. One day my father wanted me to go night camping with him. As the sun set, I began to hear heavy footsteps roaming around the outskirts of our camp. My father did not look surprised, and from the look on his face, I realized he knew exactly who or what was making all this fuss around our camp. He just looked at me without saying a word for as long as the heavy footsteps continued around us. When the footsteps faded away, he asked me, "Do you know what kind of creature has heavy-footed steps like what we just heard?" I thought for a minute, but before I could respond, my father said, "Come on, son, think!" The sounds had triggered memories I had pushed aside as I grew older, long forgotten in my mind. Memories of when I would place food in the handmade wooden feeder boxes for the harsh winters. I remembered hearing the same heavy footsteps behind the thick bushes near the feeder, and an image came to my mind. It was of a large figure laying on its stomach as it reached out from the thick brush to grab the food in the wooden feeder, a hairy arm with a dark spot. I realized it was a memory unintentionally suppressed by the effects of everyday living with school, farm work, family, and life in general. I looked at my father and he simply said, "Son, what you heard today and what you saw when you were younger is a creature called by many names, but I know them as Sasquatch." We did not say much after that and just laid in our sleeping bags, watching the stars in the heavens. For some reason, knowing this made me feel a bit uneasy for the first time in my life. I had read stories about the creature as just being myths of the indigenous people, or tales by many who were imagining things or were trying to intentionally fool people. The following week after camping with my father, he asked me to go out to an area of our land near the mountains and see if the perimeter fencing needed repairs. I drove the four-wheeler out to the location, driving along the fence, stopping for small patches and repairs. I spent several hours working until it was getting close to sunset. I started heading back along the perimeter road and came to an area near the edge of the large forest that crossed our land. Suddenly, I lost control of my four-wheeler, and when I looked at the tire, it had blown out and torn apart at the tread. I called my brother on my cell phone and let him know what happened so he could come and help me. I was about an hour away due to the bumpy, winding dirt roads on our land. I finished talking to my brother and hung up, and I began to hear loud footsteps and crashing noises behind the tree line where I was stranded. The sudden racket surprised me, and whatever it was in the tree line started growling. It sounded like a large group of animals, and I felt as though something was watching me and being aggressive towards my presence. The creatures sounded as if they were getting closer, and I began to worry. I pulled my rifle from the back of my four-wheeler just in case whatever was making these sounds decided to attack me. I decided it would be best that I put some distance between me and whatever was behind the tree line. The sun was nearly below the horizon as I started heading down the road towards the farm, hoping to meet my brother along the way. The animals kept growling and following me in the shadows of the trees as I made my way to a fork in the road. At the fork, the right led to the farm. But when I tried taking the right fork, stones and pieces of branches began to fall on the road, barely missing me, and the animals behind the tree line became more aggressive, growling more and making louder noises. When I looked towards the tree line, I could see shadows moving in eye shine as I pointed my flashlight towards the forest. Every time I tried to head to the right of the fork, the animals seemed to become very angry, so I headed left on the fork, even though it was a longer distance back. The animals' anger and growls seemed to decrease, but I could still hear them in the tree line following me. I was scared even with my rifle locked and loaded. I knew that if I headed this way, my brother may miss seeing me and wouldn't know where to find me. I tried calling him, but I no longer had a cell signal. I walked at a fast clip for several minutes, and after passing a slight curve on the road, I saw a dark figure sitting on the road in the little light left. At first I thought it was a person trespassing on our land, or maybe lost, but as I came closer to the figure, I realized it was a large something. It looked like a man wearing one of those ghillie suits, but far larger than any man I've seen. I was shocked. It was what my father told me a Bigfoot looked like. It looked like the creature from my childhood memory at the feeder. I panicked and raised my rifle, but to my surprise, in a heavy, calm voice, it said my name. I was dumbfounded as I looked closely at the creature in front of me, this hairy humanoid sitting in the middle of the road. Once again it called out my name, but this time it said,
"Do not be afraid. I know who you are, and I know you have an idea of who I am."
I felt a wave of calmness flow over me, and I was no longer scared. It felt as though he was familiar to me. The animals behind the tree line started to walk out from the shadows, and I saw it was several more of this creature. There were small, young-looking ones, as well as older ones. Some seemed calm, and others had a slight snarl on their faces. The younger ones seemed curious as they looked at me. Again, with his calm voice, the Bigfoot sitting in the middle of the road began to speak.
"I am called Nanuk. I know you must be wondering how a creature such as me can speak your language. The reason I brought you to here is to thank you. Your family has always been good to us. The food that you left to feed the other animals also helped us through the harshest of winters. I am grateful to you also. Your kindness has always been felt by my family. We would have starved if it was not for you."
I stood there in awe of what I was seeing and hearing, speechless as he continued.
"We have been watching your race from our earliest encounters. Generations have passed, and although your kind lives in conflict with nature, we know that many of your kind are good, but we hide from the world because many would not understand our existence and may harm us. You are different, just like your father and his father before him. I can see the beauty in your heart."
I finally snapped out of my haze and asked, "How do you know how to speak our language?" As I finished speaking, his face changed and his eyes became softer. It looked like he was smiling, and he said,
"We have known about your many different kind. From the stories passed down to us, we first saw the first of you here, and learned their language, and lived with nature with them. After many generations, new creatures like you came, pale in the face, and wearing strange skins as you. They began to appear in this land. Many of my kind did not trust the new ones, and at times conflicts occurred, but for some like you, with good hearts, we got to know them and learn to speak like you. Sadly, we saw the bad in so many of your kind's heart, and we retreated further into the forest. But your kind did not respect nature, and as the seasons changed, your kind grew in number and began to live everywhere in this great forest until it also began to become smaller. My kind cried, but even so, sometimes we would see the ones with gentle hearts like you, and had hoped that one day your kind would eventually unite with nature. I have been around and have had many children, as you see around you, but I fear my time will soon be at an end."
I listened intently, and when he paused, I asked him why did he choose to speak to me. He asked me to come closer, and I hesitated for a second, but in my heart I knew I had nothing to fear. I walked very close to him, and even sitting down at my feet, his head was over 2 feet above mine. He was so wide and hairy that I could not see behind him easily. His hair appeared well kept, and he smelled earth-like. Suddenly he wrapped me in his arms in a hug and began to talk in my ear, saying my name once again.
Before I leave you, I wanted to share my warmth with you and thank you for your beautiful heart.
I felt his strong arms gently hold me, and I became emotional and began to sob in his arms as he said,
Your heart is larger than most of your kind. You gave food to my family and to many others, but be careful. Not all of my kind, just like yours, have good heart. You will know the others who have red eyes. They are savage and do not like your kind. I was worried because for a long time we did not see you in these lands and believed they may take your spirit.
I thought about the spirit part and what he meant. I think he was saying he thought a red-eyed Bigfoot might have killed me. He continued holding me and speaking.
When I saw you again, my heart became warmer, and before my time here has ended, I wanted to share my heart with yours one last time.
He released me from his huge arms as I heard the sound of a truck in the distance. He looked at me with a gentle grin on his face, and then he patted me gently on my head and rubbed my hair and said,
I must now say goodbye.
I began to sob again as he stood up, towering over me, and I noticed that on his hand he had a dark spot of hair. I realized it was his hand I had seen reaching for food in the wood boxes when I was a small boy. As I watched him turn and walk away, he vanished into the trees as though he melted into them, and so did the others. I stood sobbing in the middle of the road and felt like I lost an old friend. Back at the site of the accident, my brother had been looking for me, following the road towards the farm, and saw the debris of rocks and branches on the right fork of the road. He assumed that I had left the debris to let him know that I had gone down the left fork on the road. When he found me in the dark in the middle of the road, I was still sobbing, my emotions pouring out as if a floodgate had burst open. He asked me what had happened, and I told him, trying to compose myself. We got in the truck, and we never spoke of the event again. I went back to my studies at college, returning to the farm on every break, but I never saw them again. I hope Nanuk is still alive somewhere in the vastness of the forest, and his children in the cold winters are never hungry. Dad told me before he died that sometimes when I was away, he would hear something call out my name from behind the tree lines along our farm, saying how proud they were of me. Well, everyone, thanks for listening to Squatchable's Campfire Stories. Let us know what you think of this story in the comments below, and we'll see you there. And don't forget to like and subscribe.